Think medieval people were all about chastity and purity? Think they spent their time praying and avoiding anything remotely sensual? Prepare to have your perceptions shattered. The reality of medieval sexuality was a landscape of surprising freedoms, perplexing rituals, and outright bizarre practices that would make modern notions of romance seem positively tame. Forget what you think you know about the Dark Ages, because we're about to delve into a world where sexual experimentation, bizarre aphrodisiacs, and public displays of intimacy were far more common than you ever imagined. Prepare for a journey that makes 50 Shades of Grey look like a sanitized fairy tale, where the pursuit of pleasure often overshadowed piety. Spoiler alert, the darkness wasn't due to a lack of sex, but the unconventional ways in which it was pursued. Let's start with bundling, a courtship ritual so strange it sounds like a practical joke. Imagine this: a young man seeks the hand of a maiden. Instead of a candlelit dinner, he's invited to share her bed. But here's the twist: they're both fully clothed and often separated by a wooden board or tightly bound in sacks. Bundling was the medieval equivalent of a supervised slumber party, albeit one fraught with awkwardness and the ever-present temptation to transgress. Can you picture anything less romantic than sleeping inches away from your potential beloved, with a barrier designed to thwart any amorous advances? Yet, incredibly, this wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. Families believed bundling allowed young couples to get to know each other in a safe environment. It's as if medieval parents looked at chaperoned dates and thought, this needs more enforced proximity and less opportunity for actual conversation. Special bundling bags were even manufactured, demonstrating a dedicated industry built around preventing physical contact while simultaneously forcing intimacy. The contradiction is truly mind-boggling, and, unsurprisingly, bundling often failed spectacularly. Historical records suggest that pregnancies were more frequent among bundling couples than those with traditional courtship. Putting hormonally charged young people in a shared bed, regardless of precautions, is hardly a recipe for abstinence. Religious leaders railed against bundling, decrying its immorality and inherent dangers, but their protests were largely ignored. The practice was too deeply ingrained in rural customs, a medieval equivalent of parents trying to regulate their teenagers' internet use. Technically possible, but overwhelmingly impractical. The medieval understanding of food is love took a decidedly adventurous turn. We're not talking about chocolates and champagne. We're talking about elaborate feasts specifically designed to arouse desire, featuring ingredients that would likely trigger a modern-day visit from the health inspector. The undisputed star of the medieval aphrodisiac scene was, without question, animal testicles. Young bulls, rams, and boars were particularly prized, their nether regions considered the ultimate sexual performance enhancer. Medieval cookbooks are replete with recipes for stones, their euphemism for testicles. Apparently, politeness even extended to culinary descriptions of animal genitalia, prepared in every conceivable manner: roasted, boiled, fried, ground into powder, even mixed into wine. But testicles were merely the tip of the iceberg. Sparrow brains were considered a delicacy, believed to sharpen the senses and boost virility. Dishes made from the reproductive organs of various animals were served, based on the principle that consuming fertility would somehow imbue the diner with the same. It was sympathetic magic, taken to its most visceral extreme. The spice trade wasn't just about adding flavor, it was about fueling desire. Pepper, ginger, cinnamon, and saffron were all renowned aphrodisiacs, explaining their exorbitant cost. Wealthy nobles hosted lavish love feasts, where every dish was meticulously crafted to ignite passion. Imagine attending a modern wedding and being presented with a 7-course meal dominated by animal organs and brain matter, all intended to inspire the newlyweds' later activities. Even the wedding cake was loaded with supposedly stimulating ingredients like pine nuts, almonds, and honey. Medieval physicians even dedicated treatises to aphrodisiac cooking, complete with detailed recipes and preparation instructions. These weren't clandestine publications, but legitimate medical texts studied by scholars and doctors. The obsession with aphrodisiacs became so pervasive that certain ingredients were banned during religious fasting periods, not for their unhealthy qualities, but because they were deemed too sexually provocative for those focused on spiritual contemplation. If meeting your partner's parents is daunting, imagine having a room full of nobles. Scrutinize your wedding night. Welcome to the medieval bedding ceremony, where privacy was not only unwelcome, but often legally prohibited for aristocratic marriages. The rationale behind witnessed consummation was rooted in a peculiar blend of law and social standing. A marriage wasn't legally binding until physically consummated. Given the vast wealth, land, and power at stake in aristocratic unions, witnesses were required to verify that the act had indeed taken place. Because nothing says legally binding contract like having your extended family observe your marital relations. The ritual was an exercise in public humiliation. Following the wedding ceremony, the bride and groom were paraded to their bedchamber, accompanied by a boisterous procession of guests. The bride was disrobed by her female relatives, while the groom was undressed by his male counterparts, a medieval precursor to gendered burlesque. Then came the climax, so to speak. The couple was placed in bed, while a select group of witnesses, high-ranking nobles, church officials, and close family members gathered around the bed to observe. These weren't fleeting glances. The witnesses remained for the entire event, occasionally offering unsolicited advice and commentary. As if that wasn't enough, some witnesses would then inspect the bedsheets for bloodstains, proof of the bride's virginity and successful penetration. Imagine having to present your post-coital linens to a panel of judges, like evidence in a legal case. Remarkably, this wasn't limited to royal weddings. Any marriage involving significant property or political alliances could necessitate witnessed consummation, meaning countless couples endured this bizarre ritual. Some attempted to circumvent the process by having witnesses remain outside the bedroom door, but even that wasn't always acceptable. Court records document cases where marriages were annulled due to improperly witnessed consummation, forcing the couple to repeat the performance under stricter supervision. The practice was so ingrained that etiquette manuals offered guidance on proper bedding ceremony behavior, both for the participants and the observers. Medieval society had formalized voyeurism into a recognized social institution. Medieval aristocrats didn't just engage in sexual activity, they scheduled it with the precision of a military campaign, complete with astrological forecasts and theological consultations. We're talking about an era where conceiving a child required more meticulous planning than launching a satellite. The medieval obsession with timed conception arose from a confluence of astrology, medicine, and religious dogma, resulting in the most convoluted baby-making schedule in history. Couples consulted astrological charts to identify the most auspicious planetary alignments for conception, because apparently the cosmos cared deeply about their bedroom activities. Medical texts dictated the optimal time to conceive as the waxing moon, when the woman was in a state of humoral balance, and when specific planets were favorably aligned. Some texts even recommended waiting for particular saints' feast days, believing children conceived on holy days would inherit special blessings. Imagine juggling 3 separate calendars just to determine when you were allowed to attempt procreation. The timing fixation extended beyond choosing the right day. Medieval physicians offered detailed instructions regarding the ideal time of day, usually midnight, the perfect weather, warm and humid. and even the optimal direction the bed should face, east, towards the rising sun. Engaging in sex became a logistical nightmare, demanding more preparation than a medieval siege. Gender selection methods were equally outlandish. To conceive a son, couples were advised to engage in intercourse during the waxing moon, while the man constricted his left testicle. Yes, you read that correctly. Medieval society believed boys originated from the right testicle and girls from the left. The degree of anatomical ignorance required to accept this theory is truly astounding. Religious restrictions further complicated matters. The church forbade sex on Sundays, Wednesdays, Fridays, during Lent, during Advent, during menstruation, during pregnancy, while breastfeeding, and on roughly 183 other days throughout the year. Medieval couples navigated a labyrinth of religious prohibitions to find a day when sex wasn't considered a sin. Wealthy families even hired specialists, a combination of physician, astrologer, and priest, to devise personalized conception schedules. These fertility consultants analyzed the couple's birth charts, medical histories, and religious obligations to pinpoint the optimal times for baby making. It was like medieval people invented fertility apps, albeit with more superstition and far less scientific validity. The pressure to conceive according to these elaborate schedules was so intense that some couples traveled vast distances to be in the right location during their designated conception window, demonstrating the belief that geography influenced reproductive success. Medieval society transformed underwear into religious artifacts, with predictably bizarre consequences. We're talking about a time when your choice of undergarments could dictate your fertility, and getting dressed required consulting both a priest and a physician. The girdle of Venus wasn't just a poetic expression, it was an actual belt, often crafted from silk or linen, and adorned with religious prayers, astrological symbols, or magical incantations. These belts were believed to boost fertility, guarantee safe childbirth, and enhance sexual performance. But fertility belts were just the beginning. Women wore amulets filled with substances ranging from powdered unicorn horn, actually narwhal tusk, to crushed gemstones, all intended to improve their reproductive capabilities. Some amulets contained written prayers or biblical verses, implying that God needed written reminders of their desires. The most peculiar fertility accessory was the conception stone, a small rock or crystal that women would insert into their undergarments during intercourse, believing it would aid conception. Different stones were thought to influence the child's gender: emeralds for boys, sapphires for girls, and diamonds for twins. Medieval society truly thought they could control genetics with jewelry. Men weren't immune to the magical underwear craze. They sported their own fertility accessories, including rings worn on specific fingers, amulets containing animal parts. Testicles were a recurring theme, and even specially blessed loincloths meant to improve sexual stamina. The church actively participated in the underwear blessing industry. Priests would bless fertility belts, conception amulets, and even bedsheets, charging fees for their services. Medieval society effectively turned their sex lives into a religious subscription service. Some fertility accessories were so elaborate, they required instruction manuals. Surviving texts detail how to wear certain belts, which prayers to recite while donning them, and what to do if they malfunctioned. Medieval society even created customer service for magical underwear. The most luxurious fertility accessories were fashioned from expensive materials like silk imported from China, gold thread, and gemstones, making them status symbols only the wealthy could afford. The less affluent had to settle for homemade versions crafted from local materials, creating a class system determined by the quality of one's magical undergarments. The belief in fertility accessories was so strong that some women refused to engage in sex without wearing them, and some men wouldn't sleep with women who weren't properly accessorized. Medieval people effectively turned getting dressed into a prerequisite for getting intimate. Think modern divorce proceedings are embarrassing? Try being forced to prove your sexual dysfunction before a panel of judges, medical experts, and random courtroom onlookers. Welcome to medieval impotence trials, where privacy went to die and dignity was legally irrelevant. Medieval impotence trials were the last resort in divorce cases. With divorce virtually impossible through the church, claiming spousal impotence was often a woman's only legal escape from a marriage. However, proving impotence required more than just a statement. It necessitated a comprehensive legal investigation into the couple's sexual life. The trial process was utterly bizarre. First, the couple underwent separate examinations by medical experts who scrutinized their genitals for physical anomalies. Then, they were questioned under oath about their sexual history, the frequency of their attempts, and explicit details of what transpired or didn't in bed. The real ordeal was the trial by Congress. Yes, that was its actual name. If the medical examination was inconclusive, the court could order the couple to attempt intercourse under supervision. These supervised sessions took place in designated rooms, either in the courthouse or in rented chambers, with medical experts and court officials observing through peepholes or from behind screens. The couple had a limited time to perform, and if the man couldn't achieve or sustain an erection, the marriage could be annulled. Some men tried to game the system using various enhancement techniques, medieval versions of Viagra made from herbs, animal parts, or magical potions. Court records detail instances where men were caught trying to smuggle aphrodisiacs into the trial chamber, resulting in even more humiliating examinations to ensure they weren't using artificial aids. These trials could drag on for months or even years, requiring multiple supervised attempts before a verdict was reached. Some couples had to perform for the court dozens of times, illustrating the medieval belief in providing ample opportunity to prove sexual competence. Women who initiated impotence charges faced their own indignities. They had to demonstrate their sexual willingness and capability, which often involved invasive examinations and detailed inquiries about their own sexual responses. The underlying assumption was that a man's inability to perform might be due to the woman's lack of attractiveness or enthusiasm. The social ramifications of impotence trials were devastating. Whether they won or lost, all participants were subject to public gossip and mockery. Some men preferred to accept annulment rather than endure the trial, effectively admitting impotence to avoid the public humiliation of testing. Prepare to be shocked. The medieval church didn't just tolerate prostitution. It operated the largest sex trafficking enterprise in Europe. We're talking about an institution that preached sexual purity while secretly profiting from the world's oldest profession. In 12th century London, the borough of Southwark housed 18 licensed brothels, employing over 1,000 prostitutes. And who owned these brothels? The Bishop of Winchester. The church's involvement in prostitution wasn't a clandestine operation. Church leaders maintained that prostitution was a necessary evil that prevented more grievous sins like rape, adultery, and homosexuality. Therefore, they chose to regulate and benefit from it. The business model was ingeniously hypocritical. The church couldn't officially sanction prostitution, but canon law didn't prohibit them from collecting rent from brothel owners. Medieval brothels operated under strict church regulations. Prostitutes adhered to dress codes, worked designated hours, and resided in specific areas. They were forbidden from working on religious holidays, couldn't refuse customers without valid reasons, and underwent regular medical examinations. The financial arrangements were complex and exploitative. Prostitutes paid rent to brothel keepers, who paid rent to property owners, who paid taxes to the church. It was a pyramid scheme with sex workers at the bottom and bishops at the top. The profits from prostitution were used to fund religious endeavors. Money earned from sex work was used to construct churches, support monasteries, and finance religious festivals. Medieval society was financing its salvation with sin money. The system was so deeply entrenched that attempts to shut down church-owned brothels met fierce resistance from both religious and secular authorities. Too many individuals profited from the arrangement to let moral concerns interfere. The church's prostitution empire lasted for centuries, ending only when Protestant reformers and evolving social attitudes made the hypocrisy too glaring to ignore. For hundreds of years, the institution claiming to represent God's will on earth operated a sex trafficking operation that would make modern organized crime envious. Medieval birth control methods were so peculiar, so perilous, and so utterly ineffective that they make modern contraception seem like a scientific marvel. Let's begin with the classics. Animal testicles. Because medieval society seemed to believe that the solution to every sexual dilemma involved animal genitalia. Women wore pouches containing weasel testicles around their necks, convinced that this would prevent conception. The rationale was that weasels, known for their sexual promiscuity but small litters, would transfer this controlled fertility to humans. However, testicle jewelry was just the beginning. Medieval contraception included drinking potions made from bizarre ingredients. Ground-up beaver testicles mixed with wine, powdered iron dissolved in water, and concoctions containing mercury. Yes, the toxic metal. This led to several testicle methods from the period. Some women even poisoned themselves trying to avoid pregnancy, a technique that technically worked, as deceased individuals cannot conceive. The sneezing method was particularly absurd. Medieval physicians believed that if a woman sneezed immediately after intercourse, the force would expel the man's seed before conception. Consequently, women carried pepper or other irritants to induce sneezing post-coitally. Physical barriers were equally outlandish. Women inserted substances ranging from honey-soaked wool to crocodile dung into their vaginas before sex, believing these would block or kill sperm. Some utilized half a lemon as a cervical cap, which was somewhat effective due to the citric acid, but likely highly uncomfortable and never recommended by medical professionals. The timing method was based on complete misinformation about female fertility. Medieval physicians believed women were most fertile during menstruation and least fertile mid-cycle, the exact opposite of reality. Thus, couples trying to prevent pregnancy had sex at the least opportune times, practically guaranteeing conception. Magical contraception formed its own distinct category. Women wore amulets inscribed with spells, carried special stones, or performed elaborate rituals involving everything from burning specific herbs to burying objects under full moons. Some contraceptive spells required the woman to walk backwards around a church 3 times while reciting prayers, suggesting that God required explicit instructions regarding birth control. The withdrawal method existed, but medieval physicians cautioned that it could cause serious health problems for men, including madness, blindness, and death. Therefore, even the one method that actually worked was discouraged by medical authorities who thought incomplete ejaculation would poison the male body. Medieval people were, in a word, sexually unconventional. They created a society where young couples slept in the same bed, separated by wooden planks, and the church operated prostitution empires while preaching about purity. The medieval approach to sex reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. When driven by desire or desperation, people will believe anything and try everything, whether it's wearing magical underwear, consuming animal brains for sexual enhancement, or having a court oversee their sexual encounters to resolve legal disputes. The pursuit of pleasure, or the avoidance of its consequences, often leads down paths that defy logic and challenge our understanding of human behavior. And so, as we've seen, medieval sexuality wasn't the repressed, drab affair we often imagine. It was a riotous, often bizarre exploration of desire, shaped by superstition, societal pressures, and a surprising amount of ingenuity. It's a fascinating reminder that human sexuality, no matter the era, is a complex and endlessly intriguing phenomenon. What did you find most shocking or most surprising? What questions did this spark for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation and explore this fascinating topic together. And if you enjoyed this dive into the scandalous side of the Middle Ages, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos packed with history, intrigue, and a healthy dose of the unexpected. But wait, there's more! This was just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface of this topic. Be sure to check out part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into the world of medieval sexuality. Get ready for more surprising stories, deeper insights, and even more reasons to rethink everything you thought you knew. See you there.